Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast, a show to share stories, insights, and experiences in strength, physically, mentally, and spiritually. I'm Michael Krukowski, host of the Strength Connection, and I'm so grateful that you can join me today. So in these episodes, I connect with some of the most inspiring and successful individuals to chop it up and learn from true life experiences that have helped them become who they are, the strongest versions of themselves. One of the greatest ways I've always learned the most important lessons is through stories. We all have them, and they make us who we are. So let's dive in. Here we go. John Morgan is a strength coach, Strongfirst Elite Instructor, and champion bodybuilder, and he's also the owner of Intelligent Action Training. John's one of the most knowledgeable coaches I've gotten to be around in my career, and his insight and depth into strength and coaching is fantastic. So I got to train with John during a certification that began with us randomly sitting next to each other on an airplane, which started just a great connection. And I asked him to come on the show to talk about how he's using kettlebells as a primary tool in his pursuit to win a national title in bodybuilding later this year. So some really great nuggets of wisdom in this episode, specifically on developing muscle and mastery. All right, so with that, we're going to get right to it. If you like this episode, you want to show the podcast some love, please rate and review it wherever you're listening. And don't forget to subscribe, catch all new episodes that are dropped every single week for you. All right, thank you very much. Now let's get on with the show. All right, let's make some magic. John Morgan, what's up, man? Good to see you, dude.
Good to see you too, brother. How you been?
I've been awesome, man. So it is, no, seriously, it is so good to see you. It's been a while since we connected. So I appreciate you doing this.
Almost exactly a year.
Yeah.
And thank you for having me.
No doubt. So we have a funny kind of meeting story that I think I've probably talked about it before, but I'll bring it up. Randomly sat next to you on a Southwest flight going to the same certification. You know, I mean, we're not too far away from each other, like an hour and change, you know, Saratoga and Rhinebeck. And I remember just kind of running on Albany Airport, and a Perform Better backpack just popped on the seat. And John here just says like, oh, I didn't know Perform Better made backpacks. And I was like, well, it's not a company most people know unless they're in the business. And started talking. Yeah, I'm in Strongfirst. I'm going to SFL. I was like, no shit, me too. And all of a sudden became BFFs for the rest of the weekend.
Yeah. And that was at the end of the flight. We had sat next to each other for the entirety of the flight without exchanging a word. And that was when we were getting off before our layover. And then the next day at the certification, we had matching t-shirts on. Remember that?
Yep.
Mine was red, but yours was blue.
Oh yeah, of Kettlebell gains. Yeah.
Yeah, remember that?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So no, it was awesome, dude. And it was, I mean, we got to work together through SFL with a phenomenal team, you know, with Kristen and Benny, and got to really learn a lot about you and all the work that you've done over the years. And, you know, not just a crazy strong guy, but just the intelligence that you have, the experience and the passion that you have in coaching was just a blast to work with. So that's why I wanted to have you on and just dive in, talk shop, and get to know you a little bit better.
I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you.
Absolutely. So you just came back from the Dome assisting at SFL. How was that?
It was great. I assisted Fabio, Fabio Zonin.
Yeah.
For those that on this are familiar, he is from Italy and he is a master instructor. I mean, he specifies in basically everything, but I've only known him in Strongfirst through the barbell world. Yeah. So because he was my instructor when I took it with you, and I was fortunate enough to assist him this year at the Dome, the 10th annual anniversary of this. So.
Yeah. Did he make you do the 315 demo of the deadlift for like an hour and a half like you did the last time? Or?
Oh, no, but I did do something much to my dismay that wasn't that cool. I dropped some weights off of a barbell in front of him. Yeah. Almost a sign of disrespect. I felt terrible about that because I was showboating a little bit, trying to move some weights around, and of course, blam. But much to that, that's why you use clips.
Yes. Yeah. No matter what. Exactly. Yeah, that's awesome. No, I was telling you before, I saw the pics that you guys did. Such a great crew. And that Dome, I mean, now I can't believe it's been 10 years because I was at the first one back in 2014 when they were just the level 1 and level 2 when John Ingham first put that off. And what John's done with that and then extreme training, it was really cool to see, you know, it all come to fruition for a whole decade. So it must have been really cool to be a part of that.
I'm telling you, that's a life-changing event. It really is. I think everyone that is interesting in the Strongfirst world needs to kind of check that out.
You know, it's funny too, because when SFL, I've talked about it a few different times on it, but just, I mean, the principles of Strongfirst, I always really loved when I got into the kettlebell world, 12 years ago or so when it was first RKC. And I always like these principles make sense, but I was such a kettlebell guy for so long that how it, transfers so much over into all different aspects of strength, but in like a little bit different way for the tool. And that's why I told Fabio afterwards, I was like, this is the best certification I ever went to. It might have been because I've been experienced in it for a while and we had an amazing crew in there as well. But it is like they always just shine, so much.
Yeah, the principles are overlaced in all of the certifications.
Yeah.
Core engagement. I mean, just building from the ground up.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, our crew last year was great. This, it did not pale in comparison.
Mhm.
It was equally exciting, fun, challenging, but
That's
on a
awesome.
different level because you're there on the education side, not the participant side. So
It is, yeah.
a little bit of anxiety
Mhm.
as you're kind of there representing a fantastic organization. So
It is. It's a different energy. Like it's kind of not easier or harder. It's just very different when you're, assisting, you're representing versus going through. It's good for everybody there. So, but dude, it's interesting with your story of it because, a lot of people from different backgrounds get into the world of kettlebells. You came kind of from a bodybuilding standpoint, which was interesting because I remember when Fabio put out a lot of information a little while ago about doing bodybuilding and then use kettlebells as a primary tool. It's something that you did as well. So I always thought your story of kind of everything that you've done in fitness is interesting. I want to dive into it a little bit, but before we get into that, I always like to hear the origin story of kind of the introduction into health and fitness. Like, what was your first introduction into strength training and really into health and fitness?
like originally,
Yeah, I mean,
like
bring it back. Like,
way
was
back
it
when,
a kid? Was it athletics? Was it more like, something kind of later down the line?
I was a kid, man.
Mhm.
I my entire life, my family had weights kind of like lying around.
Mhm.
My uncle on my mom's side played defensive tackle for CU,
Mhm.
and he won a Lee Willard Award, which is kind of like the Heisman for college lineman athletics, right?
CU, that's
So
Colorado University.
Colorado, yeah, Boulder,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
because I'm from Colorado now, I live in New
Mhm.
York with my wife, but and my son. But yeah, I just always strength had always kind of. Also, I come from a different era, so like we had Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, guys like this. It just like oozed masculinity, stuff that's a little different today. But yeah, I mean, my grandmother had my uncle's old weight set in the basement, and my dad had a Jack LaLanne weight set from I don't know when
Mhm.
in our basement, and I was probably in third or fourth grade, and like 9 or 10 years old, And I remember I went down there, and I was like, "What is this?"
Mhm.
My dad's like, "Well, that's how you get to kind of look like these guys on TV."
Mhm.
And despite the fact that he never touched it, he was a big guy, right? Like
Okay.
just overwhelmingly, just a strong man, not
Yeah.
like in size, but in strength,
Just
right?
that man strength. Yeah.
Man strength, dad
Yeah.
strength, So I started doing like crazy things. Like I'd do curls and I'd do floor presses, not even knowing how to get into position, but I'd load them up with these Jack LaLanne weights and start pumping this stuff out on the floor, and I'd do push-ups. Oh, and then I realized I was trying to run because, field day and things like this.
Mhm.
I realized that if I pumped my legs hard enough riding around my block, it would increase my athletic capability and my speed would naturally increase because my legs were getting stronger. I didn't add that up for years later.
Okay.
Right. But I just knew instinctually that if I did this, I would do that. So I would do like 10 laps in like circles, each direction, 10 laps this direction, 10 laps that direction, around city blocks,
Wow.
So it just, and then I'd count
Mhm.
and count and count, and they grew and they grew and they grew, and I got faster and faster and faster. So it was kind of like a natural beginning to the understanding of how strength development occurs, right?
Okay. Yeah. So your dad was, I mean, just kind of like a natural strong guy, didn't really use the weights. Did other family members use them a lot or?
Sorry, Mike?
I said, like your dad, you said like didn't really use the weights, but he was just naturally a really strong guy, just like that dad strength from it. Did other family members kind of use, weights as well? Did they kind of introduce, or was it just you went in and just started kind of doing what kids do, is just kind of playing and exploring?
It was just total exploration, man.
That's awesome.
Just total exploration.
Mhm.
I
That's
mean,
great.
no influence, no nothing. A lot of it had to do with the fact that when I was like 10 years old, or 5, right? My brother and sister were born, they're twins. So I was playing Nintendo and lifting weights in the basement. That was kind of like how
That's the life
my
right there.
life filming. And I still do that.
Yeah. Oh, it's the
With
best.
with my now 9-year-old,
Mhm. Oh yeah. It's funny. Like when you're a kid, I remember doing that. We had one of the old like total gym setups like that Chuck Norris used to endorse. And you go down there and you're just doing like 1,000 flight. There's no such thing as like rep range and stuff like that. It's just, you do it until you can't do it anymore. You rest and then, you just go from there. So that's, I mean, you really got it from an early stage from there. Did you start to study it at all kind of in high school, or kind of later on, of kind of like getting it more into like specific programming, which maybe eventually led you into like the coaching world? Like how did that transition happen?
Oh, so I had a really good coach in high school football from Oklahoma State, Jim O'Donnell. He was our lineman coach. I played defensive end and tight end in high school, and he ran the strength programs in the summer. It was bench press, squat, deadlift, military press, power cleans. You know what I'm talking about? The foundation of the majority of our experience in weightlifting.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of taught me a little bit about reps and sets and overload principles and so on and so forth. But I was actually genuinely intrigued by that, because I found that rest was equally as important as just like going hard constantly, So, and then he blended that with plyometrics. Now there's an interesting definition of plyometrics. Most people have it wrong. It's the absorption and redistribution of inertia almost, right? So you jump off, you land, you develop potential energy, stretch, float, and then propel off.
Right.
I'm going off on a tangent, but that's been misconstrued because that's wrong, right? Plyometrics are now like stand there and jump on something.
Yep, just box jumps. That's plyometrics, right?
It's wrong, But he explained that to me at a very young age. So I was very fortunate to have a good coach for high school strength conditioning. So,
oh, nice. Was he the strength coach, or was this the football coach that knew about strength?
He was the lineman coach.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was the only one that actually really paid attention to technique, form, so on and so forth. He was a huge inspiration in my life for strength training.
That's so awesome. I love hearing stories of great coaches, especially with young kids, because I've seen too many on the other end that it's just, bars are meant to go up and down. And it's just, having, 16, 17-year-old max, do like 1 rep maxes when they don't even know what the technique is, really. I had a horror story once of a kid who said he had a 225 hang clean but he couldn't deadlift 185.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, there's something that's going on here. And I was a young kid, just like, okay, where's the disconnect going on? Either you're lying, and he was trying to do this stuff, and it's like, yeah, it's not good. So
something doesn't add up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it's always so cool to hear just good inspiration and early coaches, going on from there.
Because of that, man, I was deadlifting like 500 pounds at like 19.
Wow.
18 and 19 years old. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you always were you naturally like, was it natural strength that you kind of had from there? And then all of a sudden now you got some technique, and did things like shoot up pretty quickly for you in high school?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, but it was weird. I didn't start like packing on natural mass. So for example, I wrestled 125s and 130s when I was a freshman in high school. And then I don't know what happened, but sophomore year, I gained 30 pounds and wrestled 60s. So, and that was just adding barbell work in, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, it's so fun to have that just, metabolic just surge that's going on when you're young, just like you do anything and you just put on muscle. It's freaking great.
Totally.
That's awesome. Great. So like moving forward then, you had a great strength background, like kind of working the barbell in there. When did kettlebells first come into your life? Like, was it later down the line, like when you were already coaching, or did you find that early on?
Oh man. Well, so post college, I did my internship with the YMCA, and then they hired me on as a personal trainer, even though I was going into cancer rehabilitation. My original intention was to work in cancer rehab because I had a background in kinesiology. Well, it was kinesiology for the first 3 years, and then they changed it to exercise science my senior year of university, right? So that kind of was interesting. But when I was a health and wellness coordinator, I came out of college. I was an intern at the Y. They hired me as a health and wellness coordinator. I started teaching group exercise, developing group exercise programs, my own. And then after a while, I started overseeing and helping oversee the department. This was around like 2007. So they laid off our health and wellness director. I took over as health and wellness coordinator, and we had a group exercise instructor named Lamar Sims. And that dude was an Olympic kayaker at one point. So he spent a lot of times overseas, right? Mm-hmm. And he came into the gym one time, and I thought I was the coolest dude ever, right? I mean, I was strong. I'm running this program, this department, whatever. And he brought in a 32 kilogram kettlebell, right? Okay. I'm deadlifting 500 pounds. I'm cleaning, pressing 245 easily, strict press, right? Mm-hmm. I did one swing, and it almost ripped my shoulder out of its socket. Oh, and I was injured for 3 months, dude.
Damn.
So I kind of figured out that there was something to this, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it actually told me I need to figure out how to use this. Okay. Because not much in my life has taught me humility and humbled me, but a freaking dense metal ball with a handle on it taught me humility. And it was incredible, right? Yeah. It blew my mind. And yeah, I mean, I don't think also I would have continued professionally in strength and conditioning had I not found such a device, because, you know, I came from like big box gyms and used barbells, and you teach people how to use machines, and we had fit links, and you're setting people up on all this fit links where you sit people down, you adjust their range of motion, and you continue. It's an old program, right? Yeah. And they do the same thing. And I would do that same thing day in and day out. So once I figured out that there was this like Swiss Army knife tool that could emulate any motion you could do with a dumbbell, a barbell, anything, it blew my mind, right? And it kept me going. I don't think I would have continued professionally, because you get bored watching people do curls. Yeah. You know, big box gyms are not dynamic. They're so one like string, you know?
Yeah. It is. Well, yeah. I mean, you know, if you do a bicep curl, like, yeah, you can keep increasing the strength. You can maybe change the speed and stuff like that. It's going to change, but there's really no mastery behind it. It's like, if you know a curl, like, you know, a curl, where kettlebell, yeah, it's kind of like learning a whole different sport. You know, I kind of had a similar experience with that, where a couple years in, I was the athletic guy. I always liked, you know, athletic type training, plyometrics. I was probably doing it way wrong, you know, from there, but
totally.
But I had, you know, we had Brett Jones come to our studio to do an FMS workshop. And I didn't know who Brett Jones was. Like, you know, all of a sudden he's like one of the top guys of the kettlebell world. And we had another guy there who was a freshly minted RKC. And this dude, I mean, he looked like The Rock, like a little skinnier version of The Rock. Like, he was just a monster dude. And the weekend, like early on Sunday, like the last day, everybody was getting there a little early, and they were playing around with kettlebells in this little area. And I kind of thought I was the kettlebell guy just because I liked them. And I said, hey, can you check out my swing? Like, just thinking I'm going to show Brett Jones something. And with a 16 kilogram kettlebell, he proceeded to destroy me in 7 minutes of just tweaking my technique. And I'm like, talk about like the same thing, humble. I always kind of was, whatever I worked on in athletics, it always kind of came just very easy to me. It's like, okay, I can practice it and work on it. And I eventually got it relatively quickly. This was like, oh my God, I've been working with these things for a while, thinking I've, you know, got some shit down. And then all of a sudden it was in 7 minutes, that whole like, you know, Sunday for the next couple hours, I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, what just happened? Like, I don't think I heard a word he was teaching ever in that time.
That is awesome to have that experience, especially with Brett Jones.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I have one picture with the man, and that's like one of my most cherished photos of all times in my life.
Yeah, it is. There's great people out there in the instructorship. It's so funny because this kind of puts you out like with a 32K belt. A lot of people would almost take that and just be like, oh, fuck kettlebells. Like, I'm not going to use these anymore and stuff. But you saw it differently. You saw it as like, oh, this is a tool I need to learn more on that. Has that always kind of been your personality? Like if it's something that you didn't know, or like, I need to master this?
Well, I'm hyper competitive. Whether it be with an inanimate object like a kettlebell or a person, it doesn't matter. I need to defeat that thing. But you did bring something up about mastery. And this is something I've kind of learned as time has gone on in my, career and personal existence as a father, coach, everything. You can't, the term mastery is thrown around too easily, I think. Because how can you master something that is continuously evolving? You can't. In our profession, with science and the advances and the way we can analyze gait and movement patterns and we're even doing live biopsies of people today while they're under stress. How can you master something that is ever evolving? You cannot.
Yeah. You
just have to continue to educate yourself and try and provide the best experience to people that are seeking out like new information.
Yeah.
But you yourself have to acquire it first. And that's, I think, an overlooked aspect of our profession. Right.
I agree. Yeah, it is. It's a sexy term to throw out there. I use it all the time. And because, Mastery by Robert Greene, I think it's one of the best books because he breaks it down into. The thing that I loved about that was when he talks about there's the 3 phases of mastery. And the first is the apprenticeship phase, where he pretty much says, shut up and learn. It's like, don't question it, just learn everything that you can about it. And then you get to like the second phase, was just that creative active phase, where now it's like you're taking all this knowledge and now you're creating yourself. You get to a point where now you need to influence maybe from other areas and bring new stuff in. He uses the great example of Mozart, where Mozart spent like 12 years or something like that under this one guy of just learning these songs and just mastering the piano. So finally he said like, screw you, I'm not following you anymore. He stayed in Vienna. And I think it's like all the music that we really know, like of Mozart, he wrote in like a month time frame.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause he had all this stuff in his mind that he wanted to create, but he took that time of learning first. And then it started to explore. But I love what you said there. It's like, so it seems like mastery, it's more of a mindset of an infinite game rather than a finite game. Like when you really are a master, you realize that you're never going to be a master.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
It's kind of humbling, as in you want to achieve the apex of your profession and the pinnacle of everything that you're giving to other people. You can't. Yeah. You just can't do it every time. And I mean, that's on a macro scale, but on a micro scale, when you think about it like this, like I learn something new every time I do a heavy Turkish Get Up. Every time there's something you can do differently to enhance the quality of the repetition that you're doing.
Yeah.
People don't see that. They like to just own things and say, I'm great, and I appreciate that about people. The human element wants you to be great. But there was something that you said recently. I think it was the first step is silence and the second step is listening, right? I mean, you've got to listen not only to words that are spoken, but to how you're responding physically to things,
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It is. Why do you think so many people like miss that mark? Do you think it's an oversaturation of information or kind of misinformation about what like getting healthy and getting fit is? Like, do you think it's like people think there is an end goal to it and then you get there and maintain? I mean, it's a loaded question, I know, on that, but what do you think is maybe the biggest culprit of people not understanding this?
Oh man, that is super loaded. That's kind of hard for me to dive into a little bit.
Yeah.
Gosh, mainstream messaging, right? Super bad. Geez. You know, if you look at what is presented to us daily from the social media realm, uh, it's pretty cut and dry. You have large upper bodies and tiny little bodies, or lower bodies for men. And then you got large lower bodies and tiny little upper bodies for women. It's visual messaging that is kind of controlling how a lot of us kind of react to programming, how you want to progress physically, emotionally, mentally. And the funny thing I find out about all this is that 15 years ago, the messaging was the exact same as it is now, but it was portrayed in magazines, right? And those very magazines would contradict themselves monthly because they only came out every month.
Right.
This has blown my mind for a long time. But nowadays, because of the conduits that are available to us, you have opinion being just thrown out, right?
Yeah.
15 years ago, these people were in basements banging their head against the wall trying to argue with this stuff. But now it's just spewing out. People have a hard time differentiating what is factual and what is merely opinion.
It's very true. Yeah. Well, because in social media, I mean, everything's out there. And when it's in print, this is kind of a funny thing too about writing. Like when you see something in print and it looks so kind of finished and like fine-tuned, it looks like it has a lot more merit and holds a lot more weight than it actually is, not realizing that that's just somebody's opinion out there.
Totally.
They could have just thrown that out in 2 seconds. This kind of just popped in my head, but one of the writers I love, Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club, talked about writing versus typing, and he writes his books out like in a notebook, like sloppy, ugly. And I remember somebody asked him, like, why do you do that? And he's like, because when it's in like Times New Roman, like on a sheet, like, and it looks like a finished book, like it's a lot harder to monkey with it. Like it looks very precious. Like it's a lot better than it actually is. When he's like, no, like when I write, I want it like arrows pointing, like ugly and stuff like that, because you can really fine tune it. But in social media, everything is so quick and instant and it looks exactly like it. And it's a highlight reel of it. And that's an interesting point you brought up there, John, of we've been doing the same stuff with marketing. It just used to be a harder medium to consume because it was just once a month that you were getting it from a magazine. Now you're getting it, 20 times a second.
Oh man, I mean, we're over inundated with this stuff, and people see this and they think, oh man, if I do cardio, I'm going to look like this. If I lift weights, I'm going to do this. And then they go down this path of picking and choosing what they think, perhaps from prior experience or influence, and it leads to ultimate failure, right? It does, because I mean, they're not adhering to any of the principles that we teach. And on the flip of that, then you see people like, oh, okay, I'm going to take this information, I'm going to utilize it, I'm going to try and be the best that I can be, and it fails. And then there's the other people that see all this information and it's the opposite effect. It's a negative effect. They're like, oh my God, I can never look like that.
Right.
But the thing is the people that are pumping this stuff out, the average consumer doesn't understand that it has taken these individuals years to attain that physically, that physical aesthetic,
Right.
that look, the athletic capability. It's a lifetime pursuit of this.
Yeah.
It's not instant gratification the human element wants it to be instant. It can't be.
Yeah. Well, and it's just, and the oversaturation of all that information. We say like, oh, don't compare yourself. Like, well, that's a challenging thing to tell a lot of people, especially if you're not in a good position, in your life. And I just heard this from a good friend and mentor. Like the average person scrolls social media the length of the Statue of Liberty a day. And it's like, if you go into reels,
oh my gosh.
It's like, you go into reels, which are these super professional photos of like these influencers, and then the perfect lighting and stuff like that too. It looks like, oh my God, if I don't look like that, or if I don't make that much money and be that successful in my business, I'm just a fuck up. Like there's never, like, I can't get there. Like, what's the point?
Right. I'm not going to try.
Yeah.
People spend like an average of 3 hours a day window shopping their health through a screen. That's basically it.
Yeah.
I mean, rather than empty your cup and find someone that can enlighten you and teach you the correct way of doing things, people will just continuously pick and choose. You know, you and I, we're Strongfirst Elite coaches. But we ourselves have had mentors throughout this entire process of existence in the physical realm, right? In the physical profession.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't be there without those people. My mentor actually saved me from a dark time in fitness, you know? I mean, a dark time in my life, using fitness as the conduit to get me out. In 2010, my father had been diagnosed, actually 2009, with Lou Gehrig's on Cinco de Mayo, right? 2 years later, he passed away pretty much on Cinco de Mayo. So, and at that same time, I found kettlebells, and I had it was strange. Finding that conduit as an outlet, in addition to being in a relationship with the person who is to be my wife and is currently my wife, you know, sometimes you have to dive deep into the dark matter to find purpose. And I just kind of went off on a weird tangent right there.
Oh, I get it. And
I apologize about that, but your drivers for continuing this endeavor of, you know, the knowledge to present to other people and to utilize yourself can come from anywhere. You're going to have to edit that because I just really screwed up badly.
No, I think that's powerful, man. That's huge. You know, it's interesting because like at that time, like sometimes in our darkest, like, you know, you're probably at that time, you're not thinking about mastery at that time. This is just a conduit just to let you think differently, you know, about something. And I think that's one of the things too with, you know, a lot of people when we get started in new ventures is we think that we need to see the whole journey ahead. No, you should have a vision of where you want, you know, maybe, and then work backwards. But sometimes it's just about, you know, doing it just to alleviate kind of where you need to be at the moment. And then all of a sudden you're out of the hole and then you're working it and you're building it up. You don't need to overload yourself with thinking that you need to know every single thing of what's going on. Just kind of start moving in the right direction, you know, from it. And then you'll probably find your path. You know, I think that's the thing with most people I say is like, regardless of, you know, whether you did great this week and you did poor next week, okay, just try to do a little bit better the next week, you know, just kind of stay consistent on it. And if you stay consistent, you're always going to find your way back onto the smooth road.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah. So, well, when did you get into bodybuilding? Did you already find kettlebells when you got into bodybuilding competition?
No, actually. So it was about 2010. My mentor, her name is Mary. At that time, her name was Mary Scavone Marabella. And she had like 5 Italian names. She's a fantastic woman. She's going to see this too. She said, you know, you look pretty good. She said, maybe you should consider like stepping on stage. And that blew my mind. I never considered doing it, you know. But it happened at a time where, like I said, my dad was sick and I was in a new relationship, and my wife was very supportive. And this was something that had always crossed my mind because a lot of the big influences in my life were like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, guys that were bodybuilders, right? But I'm actually a natural competitor. So I've never touched the juice, the PEDs, the TRT, the HRT, anything like that, right?
Was it just like, I did not want to do that from the beginning, or was it just, I mean, it's offered around like in all these different areas and stuff. Was it just like, it was just something you were just never interested in?
Well, I was kind of fortunate because I worked at the Y. You know, I wasn't working out in one of these pro gyms where it was handed out like candy and it was almost expected that you take it to succeed, you know? But my first competition ever was an NPC show. And back then at the time in 2010, they had a class called Drug Free for Life. So I competed in the open and I competed in Drug Free for Life. Drug Free for Life, I don't think exists anymore. So throughout the years, I've found different avenues to compete in the INBF, the WNBF, the AF, ANBF. These are all organizations that do tested natural bodybuilding. But my first show in 2010, I competed in the NPC and I took third in the open and first place in drug free for life. Right. And since then, I have not been beaten in natural bodybuilding.
Wow.
So going on 13 years, I plan on competing in November as a master, so 40 and above, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm almost expecting that there will be another me that kind of pops up and steals my thunder, because I know I did it to somebody in the past, and I'm almost expecting that and anticipating that and hoping for that.
Yeah.
Because I want the future to be charged naturally, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, when you're a competitive person too, like you don't just want to win it outright. Like you want somebody to push you to challenge. If they beat you outright, then okay, you come back stronger afterwards.
Totally.
Yeah.
This might be the last one though.
Well, you said this. I remember you said you wanted to, go into this with masters, and I mean, I believe you're turning 40 in like a couple months, from now, and going into this. And as you said, like you're using like kettlebells as a primary tool, which I think a lot of people who understand bodybuilding is a very foreign concept, but you did, you won a couple of competitions already with kettlebells as your primary tool, right?
Oh yes. And I had, I don't think I have actually done a dedicated curl since like 2018. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've only been doing, here's an interesting test for everyone that knows how to do a snatch, right? Do a heavy set of curls one day and then do 50 snatches and tell me if your biceps are more sore from the curls or from the snatches, right?
Yeah.
Now, as we know, physiologically, soreness is an indication of cross-sectional or muscle tear, right? Mm-hmm. So what is developing mass? Muscle tears indicate tears, you backfill them with protein, mass develops, right? Mm. You can overload as much as you want, but there's a limit that you can reach with the amount of weight that you can curl, right?
Right.
It's a grind. Now in Strongfirst, what do we have? We have ballistics and we have grinds.
Yep. I
have learned over the course of my existence in the Strongfirst world, this doesn't work for everybody, but ballistics build more muscle for me than grinds.
Really?
Yes. And so training my body more as a unit has actually put on more cross-sectional muscle mass than sitting there and doing curls specifically. And I'm using that as a very general example as to how to put on muscle mass and isolation, right? But I feel like snatches in my biceps. And I know other people do too, because I've asked them about this.
Yes.
A lot of the people in the organization I've asked about this. And that's like one of the primary areas. Yeah. So, I mean, in the public eye, kettlebells are kind of used as a conditioning tool for those that don't understand overload principles. And basically, if you lift heavier shit, it's going to make you stronger and bigger. Mm-hmm. Right? The realm or the rep range for strength is like what, 1 to 6? And then for hypertrophy, it's what, like
8 to 12, yeah.
8 to 12, and then above that, it's endurance, right? Mm-hmm. But if you lift heavy enough shit with a proper rep range, it's going to make you bigger. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what it is, right? But it has to be done properly.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It is. It is funny because so many people still think it's like a conditioning tool, and it is. It's a great versatile tool. I mean, especially when you do ballistic, you're not the first person that has told me that kettlebell ballistics do build muscle. And Derek Toshner's talked about that, like with his, like when he did like 044, training. And I mean, you do 044 of strong endurance with snatches, and all of a sudden, like you're doing PRs in military presses without, military presses and stuff like that. Like it is, there's something about the power development of it. And I mean, you can maximize your power and actually lift more with something like a snatch versus doing something, like a curl or like an isolation exercise.
Yeah. I mean, compartmentalizing your body used to be my thing, right? Mm-hmm. But I have noticed as I've aged that training my body as a unit is actually creating more hypertrophy. And it's a strange concept because it contradicts everything I've learned for the last 20 years.
Right. Well, isn't it
25,
like,
30 years.
yeah, isn't it like we actually still really don't know how hypertrophy works? Like nobody's actually got like the research down to being like, this is exactly how it works.
Well, that's the evolution. That's what, back to the mastery thing.
Yeah.
I mean, a master of nothing,
That's
you know?
that's so funny. Pavel's talked about that. It's like, yeah, we actually don't really know how hypertrophy works. It's like we have these different protocols. I mean, I think it's, I mean, a main principle to use from that is if you're getting stronger,
Mhm.
and then you're probably, eating a good amount to put on muscle. I mean, you're going to put on muscle.
It's strange though, because I practice intermittent fasting, right?
Mhm.
So I'm actually in a calorie reduction, and my body, because of the quote unquote functional training, which now people, the definition of functional training is kind of convoluted, as some people will say, oh, you pick this up and you put it on a shelf, right? So you need to emulate that with a weight. So you pick up a dumbbell and lift it up like a snatch or something, right? What they don't realize is that you're actually still training your body as a unit. Functional training simply means training your body as a unit for both sagittal, frontal, and transverse movement.
Yeah.
Right?
That's really how you break down multi-joint and multi-planar movement.
Multi-joint, multi-planar movement. Yeah. So that's functional training, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about like wax on, wax off, Karate Kid stuff. Back to the 80s references. But, as long as you adhere to the frequency, intensity, and duration of time under stress, amount of times per week you're working, and the volume that you're using, you're going to get bigger. I don't care if you're compartmentalizing your body or if you're training as a unit. I mean, frequency, intensity, and time, that's like Western theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like in Strongfirst, it's intensity, volume, and density.
Right.
Now that's a fine line to cross. It's almost the same thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think it's similar in terms of frequency, intensity, and duration, or intensity, volume, and density? I mean, it's a fine line to cross between what the principles that are in place for both ideologies, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's frequency. So, I mean, you can make a case that frequency and volume are relatively the same thing. It's like you're getting the same amount of, your reps in there, so it's kind of like, it's speaking, English versus British, it's like it's a different accent on there. We're kind of all speaking the same language still.
We are, but that's also very misunderstood, because the intensity, volume, and density is kind of like accumulated over time, and it's in a total amount sometimes.
Right.
Whereas now we're going back to frequency, intensity, and duration. We're talking about like Milo in the calf.
Right.
And linear trajectories. Mm-hmm. Which we know, if you go in a linear trajectory when you're working out, if you keep adding and adding and adding, you're going to get hurt, and you come down here like this. Exactly. Mastery, okay? Pick a weight. It's pretty streamlined. Yeah. You use it so much that it becomes incredibly light, and then you jump up significantly, keep going like this.
Yeah,
like
that's the step loading principle, right?
It is. And then you have varying like this.
Right.
Right. So I'm a big believer in step, because your connective tissue is going to adapt to that. And therefore, you're going to be more capable of sustaining a heavier weight in the future rapidly. Yeah. So if it's thrown at you.
Yeah, and the thing that I see, John, too, with training on that is, when you maintain that same, weight, like the same intensity on it, like first off, like if you pick a weight, I've been working a lot more with like submaximal loads in training than like really trying to push it. And I mean, you can kind of train nearly every day. Your body feels a lot better on it. It's actually kind of when you can practice the movement as well, like you're actually getting into a state where you're focusing on getting better at the particular movement. It's actually really joyful at the same time as well. And I think that's something that we sometimes miss in training. Like, yeah, you need to push your body, like you need to put it under strain and under load, and you need to, test it, but you need to enjoy the process of it too. So not every day needs to be progressive overload. It's like that Milo in the calf. It's like, I'm guessing he probably got to that day when the cow was a little bit too heavy where you couldn't get it in, and you're either straining and you're tearing a bicep while you're, lifting it up. Like it's not the only way, to do it. That's why I love, the principles of the work that we do with Strongfirst, is because I only knew progressive overload beforehand. You want to get stronger, you need to increase the weight and keep the volume up there. And no, it's not the only way to do it. Actually, you build the skill of it. And I think, like, kind of going back to our, like, what we were talking about a little while ago, is where people miss that, is I still don't think a lot of people understand, like, that, strength and nutrition, even, like, it's all a skill that you can develop. It's like, you can, just like a sport. And if you kind of learn that at the beginning, and you can understand, like, oh, I'm getting better at this skill, not I increased my weight, or I dropped my, the scale went down this week. Like, those aren't the only biomarkers of it. Like, it's a different pathway. And I think it's a better way to kind of talk to people about goal setting and about actually getting into programs like this.
Big time. I couldn't agree more. It's like, people come in to my studio and they want the total package. They want a strength program, they want a cardiovascular program, they want a diet program. I've noticed that if you just throw those three elements at people immediately, this has taken me 20 years to figure out. It's failure.
Yeah. It's too much at one time, right?
It is. And a lot of the people that are coming into my studio are like serious business professionals, parents, they're busy. So throwing three new elements into their life just doesn't necessarily make sense. I start with strength, and then we'll get into the diet a little bit, and then we'll start adding cardiovascular as they discover that you actually have time to do these things, right?
Yeah.
I
love that.
A lot of training is, we're accountability buddies for people.
Yeah.
Right. They need us in their life to have this dedicated time to do something other than their everyday routine.
Yeah. It's that check-in time, it's that building the discipline up and the consistency of it. That was something this took me a long time to learn too, because I got so deep into the intuitive side of training, which I think is a path of mastery that you need to go down. But for most people, I think still you need to just get the consistency in there, just kind of get the proper movements in, kind of keep it as simple as possible of just getting down. And it's funny, I'd be curious, with your training now, that you said as you're aging, kind of things change, body changes from when you're early on. Like, has your programming gotten simpler as it's gone on? Kind of going into this next competition, have you changed a lot since what you did in the past?
I was actually going to send you a picture earlier today. That actually, you were talking earlier about how in Times New Roman, everything just looks perfect. My notebook for working out, as I do document everything I do, is scribbles and X's. And it's just, there's no pattern to it.
Yeah.
On paper, there is overload principles adhered to, but yes, straightening, my son just lost a tooth. That's pretty cool.
Congrats, bud.
Yeah. Shoot. But on paper, there's a lot of X's and O's, but yes, I have streamlined things, and that's for two reasons. I like standardized testing. And in addition to doing a bodybuilding show in November, there are two standardized tests that I want to pass, right? And I think we know it. We kind of know what they are in the Strongfirst realm, right? I want to do the Beast Tamer, and I want to do Sinister together. So in addition to a bodybuilding show, I've developed a program for myself that basically is swings, get-ups, pistols, military press, pull-ups, and deadlifts, right? And I'm going to see, this is a self-experiment. I'm going to test this. Oh, and on the off days, I'm doing actually Gear Sport long cycles for conditioning. So back to the kettle being a versatile tool, I'm going to do long cycles for conditioning while blending that with the strength development from different rep ranges. So yes, I'm going to solidify a specific amount of exercises to accomplish three goals: bodybuilding, strength development, and those standardized tests.
Wow. Okay.
So we'll see if it works, right?
Okay. And you want to do this all within the same time frame?
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's a hell of a fun goal.
Yeah, but you got to think it's also 6, 7 months, 8 months.
Oh yeah.
So it'll modify and it'll change as time goes on. Right.
How do you modify that? Like, how do you look at that? Like, do you do like a kind of a weekly check-in on like, all right, this is how this week works and make adjustments? Or do you like set up like, this is the next 8 to 12 weeks and I'm following this down like kind of to a T? How do you work that?
Well, we've been kind of talking about this a lot. I mean, not personally, but through social media, instinctive, intuitive training. If it hurts, I don't do it. If I want to lift heavy and don't feel like it, I won't. I'm not going to actually block out time nor add exercises in that time. I'm going to train to movement patterns, right? So push days, pull days, ballistic days, and grind days, and just see how it all pans out.
Love that.
And I'll update you as that goes, as to how this all is structured, right?
Oh yeah, I'll be pumped on that. So I've got a couple things I'm working on, but then I want to get back into a sinister journey again, because I was doing that for a while and then had a wrist injury with the get ups. Just heavy get ups are challenging on the wrists to do. I've got to be really just mindful of that on one side. And but it's a fun challenge to work with, man.
It is, man. And Matthew Flaherty, you know who that is?
Yep.
So he was kind of upset with me at the Dome because I cleaned a 48 and pressed it. And then I just cleaned it cold, right, into a goblet position and did like a pistol.
Yeah.
And he was like, what are you doing, man? But what he doesn't know, I was showboating and my wrist has been screwed up since that day. So if he sees this, yeah, I'm hurt.
Oh man, that's great. I think, I remember Max Shank did that for his Beast Tamer challenge. I think because his press is just insane. I think he just did a press, just popped it right into a pistol and then did that. And I think he did a couple of pull-ups from there. So that's awesome, man. I love it. I mean, you've accomplished so much already in the physical realm of this world. To kind of put these things together, I think is such a really cool challenge.
Yeah. I just want to see if I can, it's good to have goals. People that don't have goals don't really accomplish much.
Yeah, well, it keeps you just a little focused on those days that maybe you're not as focused as you normally would. It kind of is just that good checkpoint there. So
big time.
That's awesome. So, well, John, I have one more question. I love asking this with people because I think the variance of our personal descriptions can change, but I think it's a powerful question, which is, how would you personally describe being the strongest version of yourself?
Oh, that's a tough question to answer, as it's kind of ever evolving. I've kind of conquered a lot of physical strength boundaries in my life, and I don't equate strength as anything physical. I think it's more emotional, spiritual, things like that, I think that the greatest gift that you can give people is knowledge to develop strength and to maintain strength, whether that be physical or emotionally. So on a macro scale, giving the gift of strength through education is huge, but, absorbing the hardship of business ownership, parenting, being married, coaching, mentor, still being a student, and still being able to put one foot in front of the other and kind of smile no matter the circumstance. To me, that's kind of like what true strength is,
Love that.
Yeah, that's my definition, man.
Love that.
But like I said, that could change tomorrow.
I'm sure.
Depending upon what we're handed in our life.
No doubt. John Morgan, dude, you're the best, man. Seriously, appreciate you taking the time today. This was awesome. And we'll have to do this again because I've got way more questions. And when you're doing all this stuff coming up soon and tackling all these things, we'll have to talk more about it. So thanks so much, brother.
Thank you, brother. And I actually don't feel like I did you any justice here. There's so much stuff that was going through my mind. I just kind of all
That's how we roll. It's awesome. Absolutely. That's how we go. So no, man, it's seriously, it's always great talking to you and everything that you're working on and achieving. And I value our friendship so much. So I appreciate it.
Likewise, Mike. Thank you so much, brother.
Awesome. Listeners, go follow John, check it out, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. All right. Peace. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait, go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.